Good afternoon, Sven.
Hi, Larry.
Nice to see you again. It's a pleasure to have you speaking to our Convention Center of Canada members again. And as I look at your screen, I see in your background your logo and information on your upcoming conference. So why don't we start there? Can you tell us a little bit about your conference? I'm particularly interested in the design of the conference, given you did run a virtual event last year. I'd like to know how that went, and then what you're planning for this year.
Okay. So yeah, this year's theme, as you can see, is elevation. Reflecting, I think, our joint ambition, not only to reopen for organized events, but actually to take them to a different level. And Barry, you're absolutely right. Last year in Paris, we indeed had this hybrid, whereby we had live and digital combined. But we found at the end, and that was a key lesson learned, is that at the end, nobody was really happy with the outcome. We had people in a room in Paris watching a screen. And then because of that agenda, we weren't able to give enough sessions for our Asian colleagues early in the morning or the American colleagues late in the evening. And we really felt that we had to break things up and have a digital conference and a live conference, but in a format which is suited for purpose. And so that's exactly what we're going to do this year on a Friday and Monday. We're going to start at 3 o'clock in the morning European time until 11 o'clock at night European time. So 20 hours of content. We'll do that on Friday and Monday. And it's really like a TV show. You should imagine an interactive BBC World Service. And that way, wherever you are in the world, you will have access to a full program. And that will be followed by a live conference 2 days again, Wednesday in Lausanne. And it is live only, focusing on networking, getting together, talking to each other, having lunches, coffees, and also discussing the future of our industry. But really splitting the two things up, because in our view and in our experience, given the importance of learning and networking, to make it purposeful for all parties, it's better to split them up.
I understand. To me, it's quite interesting to see how many organizations are looking at their event design and deciding that because the virtual audience is a different audience than the live audience, trying to do them together at one time. And as you described your experience last year, may not be the best model, which brings into question whether or not venues should adapt to this by creating new facilities, building presentation studios. What's your view as to how venues should adapt to this?
That's really good question, Barry. I think what if you look at the reality with our membership is that the vast majority of our members is investing some kind of money into what they call studios. But it varies enormously. It goes from, I built this little studio of 50,000 euros and it will serve its purpose, to some members invested millions in a studio which allows for even holographic technology. And I think the key question behind this is what you alluded to. How do you monetize this? How do you make sure that whatever you're investing at the end will provide a return on investment? And I think that is something our community at large is struggling with. Because to be honest, the key added value of any convention center is offering the experience by bringing people together under one roof. And yes, we can have a studio and we can reach thousands of people with that studio, but then we have all that space left. And what do we do with that space? And how do you monetize that? And that's a struggle. And that is something we need to get terms of. Because personally, I believe that the digital aspect will continue to be there, that indeed convention centers will be more and more multi-channel platforms, but we need to do it in a clever way. And indeed, we alluded to it when we talked about the conference. It's looking for the best solution for the best fit for purpose, as you put it in English. It's listening to the organizer. What do you want to achieve? Which audience do you want to reach? Okay, these are the challenges, channels we have. This is the way we could approach it, and together with the organizer come to kind of partnership, because it will have at the end also an impact on income and business models.
So let me segue to that discussion of different business models. from this. Earlier this week, you had one of your master classes, and it was on pricing models.
Yeah.
And I'd be very interested, and I know our audience would as well, as to what you learned from that discussion.
Well, it was very interesting indeed, in the sense that I think that at the end, the common conclusion is that the situation we had in 2019, where would have an organizer come to you, you would take your pricing list and you'd say, X thousand square meters, these are catering packages, and this is the advertising based on the standard pricing list. That's going to go away because the needs of the organizer will be different. They will involve digital. We will need to think about this differently, and the off-the-shelf pricing model will not work anymore. It will be tailor-made pricing models per type of customer. And I think the entire experience we as an industry have created over the last 20 years in pricing models, we will partially need to rebuild that. And that's not going to happen overnight. That will take time, but it will be far more tailor-made to the needs of the organizers and the customers.
I can imagine there's a fair amount of resistance to such a profound change in pricing and seeking revenues. Did you get that sense from the participants in your class?
No, absolutely. I think whereas the customer-facing staff of the venue, so typically the sales managers, they fully understand this. It's now up to them, and that's their big challenge. It's also up to them to convince their general manager, their finance manager, their operations manager that this is the road to go. And so it takes a lot of stakeholdering to make that happen. And that's why I'm saying it's not going to happen overnight, because if you have, and that is a normal reluctance, if you have been running your business for 20 years in a certain way, changing it, it's not always that easy. But I do hope and I do believe that the crisis we had over the last 18 months should be a catalyst for change. But yes, there is definitely reluctance and even resistance to change.
Let me change gears on you, Sven. One of the very topical issues around the world today is, as we see vaccinations get a greater proportion of the population, and we're thinking about reopening borders, is vaccine passports and/or rapid testing. And this is something in Canada that is on the forefront of the advocacy agenda. Is what does that look like? When you think of vaccine passports or other forms of documentation, what are you seeing, and what do you hope to see?
Well, those are two very different things. What I'm hoping to see is a uniform approach. What I'm hoping to see is a passport which applies the same rules across the world, which is mainly targeted internationally. What we're seeing in reality is very different approaches, even per country. So if you look, for example, in Denmark, if you have been vaccinated, you're allowed to do a lot more than somebody who has not been vaccinated. In France, there the rule is, well, know what? No liberties until everybody is vaccinated. That complicates things, and that's on one continent. What I'm very hopeful for, though, is that European Commission this week said we will be ready with our work around the European Green Passport at the start of June, so not at the end of June. And it will be indeed a uniform approach, which implies either you have been vaccinated, either you have a negative test, or either you have antibodies, which for me is the road to go, and with something I think which is quite similar to your situation, Barry.
That's correct. TIAC is advocating for just that, a uniform approach on international borders, not within the country, that the documentation required would allow for both vaccination, antibodies, and rapid testing, and all of those would get rid of the quarantine requirements, and that the way it would be set up would protect personal data. So there wouldn't be a need to, it would be on a software tool that would keep your identity confidential, so that you wouldn't have to declare which of those three scenarios you were in. You'd been vaccinated, you'd had a rapid test or not. So that would be the preferred position. Because the United States is a little further along, we're seeing what they're already doing. And I'll pick up on what you said. What we'd like to see and what we're seeing are probably two different things. By way of example, one of the stadiums in New York State for their baseball games are already allowing different privileges for someone who's vaccinated or not. They put them in different areas of the building. And that's one of many examples where we're seeing different examples. Different states are also introducing legislation around this issue as well. So a fast evolving field, and one where I think we'll see more changes before the end of the summer.
Indeed.
In your comments, Sven, you were talking a little bit about different countries. So why don't we turn to that? Obviously, the world is opening up at different rates, and you have a very international market and set of members. Could you tell us what you're seeing around the world in terms of reopening?
Absolutely, and it's a very mixed image, but very often you can relate either to the status of the vaccine program or either the overall status of the health situation in the country. And if we go to the very other side of the world, Australia to start off with, there what we're seeing is that venues are able to reopen to 100% of their capacity, but given travel restriction that Australia imposes, because they have a very low infection rate, but also a very low vaccination rate, they're simply still keeping the country closed, but venues are reopened at 100%. So national events happening. Moving a little bit up, Japan, China, very much the same story, open for business, national events. And then you have other countries like Hong Kong and Singapore, they're heavily dependent on international events. They don't have any national market. Therefore, at the moment, they're still closed. There is simply no market for them. I think when it comes to international events, the one exception I see, though, is Dubai. Dubai is now fully steaming ahead for Expo 2021. They are organizing international events. They're doing a lot of efforts to show that they can be done in a safe and secure way, and they're doing a great job. Moving to Europe, that I think is a little bit an image which we will see is that for the moment we have national events happening, small ones in separate countries. They're growing, so it's going from 50 to 150 to 1,000. I think as from September we will have really European events, but the true international events similar to the other regions in the world, I think those will start again next year. And then coming to your region, North America, I think there it has been impressive what the United States has done with the vaccination program. And I think as a result of that, and that's what we're hearing from our members, is that organized events will take place again as from June, and quite massively so throughout the States. And then Canada, I think, Barry, a far better place than I am to tell what's happening in Canada.
Well, I would say Canadians by nature are very conservative. Our government is also very conservative on this particular front. I'm not optimistic that we'll see any international events until later in 2022. And the national events or regional events that start up in the fall, the last quarter, will probably be on the smaller side. Yeah. Again, that's just a prognosis, as opposed to we have not actually seen the regulatory framework that we'll all be operating in. In fact, that's one of the frustrations of the industry is lack of clarity on the reopening guidelines. If we hit certain milestones, we should be able to plan on certain things. And there's a reluctance to give us that sort of forward guidance. So the industry continues to advocate for that.
Well, let me give one example of that, which frustrates a lot of people here in Belgium. We're Friday today, tomorrow, Saturday, the terraces are allowed to open in Belgium. And till now, it is still not clear whether the owners of the restaurants need to respect 1.5 meter of distance between the bubbles sitting on the terrace, or whether they can simply put plexiglass between the tables. And we're less than 24 hours before opening. I don't know. Sometimes it's, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I feel for those having to make these decisions. There's so much complexity to it all. It's understandable there will be the odd mistake or the odd frustration. My frustration right now is I can't get a haircut, as you can see, and I can't golf. So I'm looking forward to both of those. And Sven, I'm also looking forward to participating in your event in July, although it'll be virtual. And I'm hoping I can convince you to come to Canada in the fall, where I predict and I'm confident we'll be able to meet face to face. But time will tell on that too.
Just try to keep me awake. I'll be there.
Very good. Thank you again for doing this, Sven. All the best, and please enjoy your weekend.
You too. Thank you, Barry. Bye.